Gwan, how you there? What's good? And you know who this is, baby. The number one podcast in America, dedicated to all you kings and queens of color, homies and homettes, shotters, woo gals, G-boys, and charges. The one and only Jerk Jollof and Collard Greens podcast.
What's good, y'all? Welcome to episode 55, Gender Wars. It's all of us together. The JGC panel discusses how to become more aware of the messages that shape boys, men, girls, women's behaviors. How can we stop acting according to those traditions or traditional definitions and start being true to our authentic selves? If you're already a follower or perhaps tuning in for the first time and would like to learn more about the show, you definitely check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Jerk Jollof Collard Pod. Additional ways to reach us will be right in the outro at the end of this episode. Hopping right into the Rep Yours should be Pop-Up Baby. It is a mobile playground for babies and toddlers available for parties, special events, weddings, play dates, and more. Owned by Glennis DeCure, the gym includes soft play equipment, ball pit, ride-on toys, trampolines, slides, and more sensory for play. Haven't been on in a minute, so I'm just gonna run it straight up. So we go ahead and do it. We got D-Black on here, we got Dre on here. Oh, it is going to be a great episode, gentlemen. Wanna know why?
Why?
I'm hosting my shit.
Oh, okay.
I am back.
Guess who's back?
From a little bit
Back
of a
again.
hiatus. It's good. It's good seeing you, gentlemen. It's good, hanging out with y'all. A lot going on in the world, man. A lot has happened since I've been going. I can't say I'm a contributor to this because I am not. This is what happens when I'm not on episodes. Shit
The
just
world
pops
just gets
off.
crazy.
It just gets insane. So let's start it off. D-Light, what are your thoughts about gender roles? Well, what is a traditional gender role to you?
Oh man, I feel like answering these are getting a little bit more complicated because there's so many more layers to this now. I don't know. I guess first for me, when I think about gender roles, I always try to think about it from the perspective of if we didn't have all this technology and all the things that we have, all the conveniences we have in society, that would kind of let me better define where we would be. If the grid, the matrix was to shut down today, I mean, we'd be living in forests and woods, foraging and things like that. So those responsibilities that kind of traditionally defined with the man cutting down a tree and building a house and doing those things, and then the woman kind of helping to nurture the next generation and provide sustenance and making sure that everybody in the family is safe and sustainable and things of that nature. So the guy being more the worker and getting in the trenches and physically like in the dirt, and then the woman kind of being more of the brains and the intellect and kind of fostering the mindset and the ideologies of the family. That's what I think of. But again, that's like if you take out technology, everything that we are today. But if you keep all that back in, I don't know how to answer that question. To be honest.
Shout out to Francis.
Shout out to my boyfriend.
Inconsistent answer.
I gave you an answer. I gave you an answer with a caveat.
Trey.
I think for me, I don't know if I necessarily assign them to gender now. I think we're just kind of how the world that we live in. I think it's more just whatever the individuals kind of assign. So for example, I'll just use like myself or my wife, for example. There's probably things that there's probably certain roles that I have that may be traditional, masculine or, traditional male, roles when it comes to, maybe providing or, if something needs to get fixed, right? Or I don't, you know what I mean? There are some of those traditional things that I think are in place, but I kind of feel like with today's world, there is no necessarily gender assigned to like, oh, if it's a woman that she has to cook and clean and you know, take care of the baby. Like I think that in the kind of our, maybe when we were younger, that was like very traditional and like, yeah, the mom is supposed to do this and the dad is supposed to do that or whatever. But I kind of I don't necessarily assign any of those kind of those traditional ones, at least in my everyday life. You know, there's probably things that, you know, that I do that, you know, maybe, you know, would, you know, in my day to day that maybe someone's like, oh, that's, you know, maybe that's what a woman does, or, you know, or vice versa, right? You know, so I personally don't know that. I know that sounds super PC, but I do really feel that there isn't a gender assigned to any roles, at least in my world, my everyday life. And I just feel like, which I'm actually excited about. Like, I don't know if, I think this is like one of these good things that like, or it's good that this is changing and that it's not necessarily these things are assigned to gender anymore, that it's just, you know, who's going to do it, right? You know, like there's a thing that needs to, there's this thing that needs to happen. You know, I would hope that if you're in a healthy relationship, like, you know, you guys talk about those things and it's like yeah, I got this. I'm putting my hand up. I can do this thing, right? And maybe it's not, I always have to do this thing because I'm doing it this one time, right? It could be that this week I'm cleaning and next week I'm cooking, right? Or I don't know, whatever the thing is, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like this is one of the things that I'm more that I'm really excited about. That things are a little bit more fluid, so to speak. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but that's kind of how.
No, you're fine. I may have some follow-up questions to that. Really, you know, that's what you really think.
And if I may, you know, I think that it's actually really interesting too, because as we kind of look at this specific time, I know you kind of have more follow-up questions, but it is kind of so unique how it's all based on preference. You know, it's based even when like we don't even can't even I don't even know if we can really even say gender roles anymore, because it is all about tasks, and with technology everybody has the ability to technically do everything. Yeah. So it's not necessarily localized to a specific group, you know. Now, when we talk about quality and efficiencies and things like that, you know, we can have further conversations. But in just capability, just focusing solely on capability, everybody has the ability to do everything. You know, because I don't need to necessarily know how to fix a car. I could go to a mechanic and have the mechanic fix it, or just as equally as my wife can have a mechanic go fix it. Yeah. So
I'm
you know,
just gonna pull on all these strings in a little bit.
You say what?
Someone pulling all these strings in a little bit.
Pull
Okay,
away, man.
we'll pull them,
Pull away. Let's do it.
So to be straightforward, like, and then not be PC, is just to be honest. Like, yeah, I had expectations of gender roles because they were taught to me in a certain way, whether it be taught to me by parents, grandparents, or society, or friends. They were taught to me a certain way, and there was a reason for that during that time, because that's how things were. Like, we're trying to navigate through being PC, like, oh, everyone has the opportunity to do whatever they want. The shit's been like that. Like, this isn't the first fucking time where it's just like, oh, okay, now a woman can go to the mechanic and do this shit, because back in like 2000 they couldn't. No, that's not it. Unless you want to talk about the women's rights movement, then yeah, then there's a discussion right there, right? Because then they had to fight for their right to do certain things that men could do. But at the end of the day, at no point they couldn't do what we could do, right? There were female mechanics when we went to World War II. There were women stepping in working in factories. So women could do what a man can do. We just decided to make a separation in that. That was a societal choice. So what you're saying today, or what people are saying today, isn't a brand new concept, isn't a brand new accepted concept. It's just that now we're starting to pay attention to like how these things actually work, and people are giving effort to say, okay, that's okay. And we're no longer accepting someone saying that you can't do this because of your gender, right? We're starting to knock that down. But you can't tell me, besides the women's rights movement moving forward, that women didn't have the ability to do what men did. They even played baseball very early, right? So these are concepts that we think that are unnatural or not true, but you had women superheroes back in the day, right? You had goddesses back in the day. So that even showed you that women can do what men can do, if not even better. So those gender roles that we put in place was more so of a comfort zone for us as human beings to put things in the categories. Now, getting back to the point of challenging y'all, taking out the trash, right? Or mowing the lawn. You don't let your wife take out the trash and mow the lawn?
See, but I'm a traditional kind of guy, so I'm not like if it's a gritty type of thing, and if I'm going to do it. If it's something dirty,
But she
messy,
can. But
I mean,
she
it doesn't
can,
mean she
right?
can't.
If she can't,
But if she
and
wanted to, here's the thing. Again, it really comes down to so as I define myself as a man, I basically want to take away the things that my wife doesn't necessarily want to do, right? So so that even can tie to things that are maybe more traditional for for a woman. That's how I define myself as a man. My ideology as a man is taking away the things, making my wife's life easier, my family's life easier. That's how I define my manhood. So if it means that I gotta wash dishes, I gotta wash dishes, or I gotta take out the trash, I gotta take out the trash. It means I got to do the laundry. I got to do the damn laundry and fold it perfectly. Because if I don't fold it perfectly, she gonna unfold it, and then we fold
That
it
sounds like more
again.
like a personal issue than anything else.
And then she gonna reteach me how to fold. But but that's my point. For me, if it's something that she doesn't want to do, I need to be prepared to step up and do that.
yeah, and I'll say
I
that
get it, man.
I take out the trash the majority of the time, but I sometimes my wife will just, if I'm with my son or whatever, she'll just like quickly like, I want to do this, right? I want this, the trash is really smelling awful right now. She will do it. It's not about me letting her. I saw that you use, I'm gonna pull your string. You said letting her, right? Yeah, for the most part, I do that. But yeah, are there times when she does it? Yes, just because she decides to do it, right? And sometimes I'd be like, well, I could have done that, right? Like we may have that conversation, but that's what, at least that's how I see it.
So I'm gonna step back into that letting her part, right? So letting her
I'll
means
just say
completing right
you said
there.
it, so I just wanted to,
No, 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 no. I like
you
it.
use
I
the
like
word,
it.
be pulling strings.
I
So
like it. I like it. And just pull the string back. So we gonna stay on this.
This string, bro. So much tension.
So like letting her, like if I'm sitting in the same space with her and she picks up the garbage, right? Takes out the trash, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna take it and take it out, right? Not to say she's not capable of doing it, but like what D Black said, it's just that gritty chore, right?
yeah.
So it's just like that's my responsibility. That's how I was taught, and it makes her life easier because it's something else she can focus on, like making a sandwich. That was a joke. But there's other things that she can do.
I don't understand what's wrong with that.
There's other things that she can do, right? So this is that compliment that D Black talked about, right? So it's just like, it's not that you can't do it. It's not that like, hey, I own you, I'm not letting you do whatever this is. It's just like, I really am going to take that from you, because not to say you're not strong enough, but like, hey, like I was made a man for a reason, right? Like my muscle mass is a bit denser. Let me just use that, right? She's smarter than I am, so she's going to do other technically sound things. It's just that complementary stuff. So it isn't really a gender role. It's more so like, let me use my tools and qualities to my advantage to assist my marriage or relationship, right? So that gender role stuff, it accidentally falls into a gender role, but realistically, it's just complementary things, right? And it's easier to label something than it is just to leave it out in space, because then you can't manipulate it or enhance it. So when we look at those gender roles and how we are taught those, who had the biggest influence in your life? Or what had the biggest influence in your life when it came down to learning about gender roles? As much as you say those things don't exist, I'm going to combat that and say that they do. There's some things that we innately see that this is male, female, or transgender, right? So it's not to knock out any other gender. I can't really speak on transgender because I have little to no experience on it. So if you're a transgender person listening to this, I'm not ousting you, and we're more than happy to have a transgender person on here to explain things to us. But for me and my perspective and how it sits, this is what I saw as, male, female. Like what gave you that influence, or who gave you that influence?
So for me,
I mean, I guess.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was gonna say the easiest way for me is probably my parents, right? Growing up with my parents, I think there were, my mom for the most part cooked most of the meals, and when my dad cooked, it was like a special thing. It was like oh, dad is cooking, whatever, um, you know, but yeah, and I would say my dad took out the trash, did all that stuff, right? So I would say that would probably form that stuff. There were things though that like I guess stereotypically, like my mom would put stuff together. Like my dad is just not good at putting stuff together, right? So if something needed to be put together, my mom would do that just because she's just like good with her, hands or whatever, right? My dad would just pay someone to do it. Like that would be his thing. It's like, I'm not going to do that, right? If something needed to, whatever it is, just, I'm just going to pay somebody to do it or whatever. My mom would be like, no, we could just do this, right? We could just put together this table, or we could put together this, whatever it was. So I would say that formed it. I still, to push back on you, I don't know if I necessarily looked at those things and said like, oh, because my mom did it, then only women can do that. At least that's just not how my brain looked at it personally. I never looked at it that way. I just looked at it like, oh, this is what my mom does. This is what my dad does. And that's how I always looked at it. But I never, just me personally, I never really looked at it as like, I mean, yeah, maybe we tell some jokes, make me a sandwich or whatever. But like for the most part, I don't know if I necessarily looked at anything either one of my parents is doing like, that's what women do and that's what men do. Now maybe it's something subconscious if that's what you're kind of hinting at. But I don't think I never necessarily made the association of like, this is only things that men do or this is what women do. I never quite looked at it that way, but maybe subconsciously that's how I did.
Yeah, I'm actually, Dre, I'm glad you went first because you actually made me rethink about some of my kind of social programming a little bit, because I mean, ultimately I was thinking about like my parents as well. But for me, it actually goes a little bit further than that because my culture, is really what defined this for me. Because like Nigerian culture is very, I guess, kind of falls more to that traditional ideology with certain specific tasks that are associated with women and very specific tasks that are associated with men. And outside of my house, even in other cultures, I still saw this. So whether for the good or the bad or however, this is kind of how this is what I grew up thinking like, oh, this is what women do. This is how women act, and this is how a man should act, and this is the task that a man should perform, and this is the task that women should perform. And the one thing I did ultimately kind of grow up as I grew up, yes, I understood that those tasks were no longer associated with a specific gender, but you know, I think the one thing I think about it differently is because I don't know. I feel like sometimes people get triggered when you say like, "Oh, cleaning is women and this is men," and like at the end of the day, you still look at the culture in which it came from, and there's an ecosystem there that's that's really much built on respect, right? So if my dad asked my mom to make him something to eat, she didn't look at it like, oh my God, he's trying to belittle me and take control of me or do something like that. Or if my mom, sent my dad off to go like fix some things or go to the grocery store or do whatever, it wasn't like she was ordering him around. I feel like sometimes the pride and stuff gets caught up in there, and that's maybe what makes it so difficult for us to kind of accept that there's a possibility that there could be something associated with me because of my gender, right? But I think for my upbringing, it was more about respect, and it was more about an ecosystem that this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is what works for our specific group, and this is the lessons that we teach to our children that will hopefully lead them to have successful relationships as well.
No, I can dig it. Man. So do y'all agree with gender
What?
fluidity?
I
Wait,
do. I do.
I missed it.
He said,
Oh,
do
gender
we agree
fluidity.
with
Okay.
gender fluidity?
Okay.
I do. Again, I have this mindset that I apply to almost everything in life. What other people do is none of my business unless it's affecting me personally, right? So unless whatever you're doing is specifically involving like my day-to-day life, I don't care what other people do. So um, you know, if someone wants to kind of present themselves in a gender fluid way or whatever, I don't have any issue with that. I really am big on the, like, it's not my business. As long as it's not personally affecting me, I don't care. People should live their lives however they want to live. You know, and also it's one of those things I always looked at it too, is like, I don't know what that is like, right? I didn't make a choice to like be a man, right? I didn't decide this is how I felt. So I just assume that those people have that same like approach to it, that they didn't decide, right? That's how they feel. So that's how I look at it, is I just don't affect me. Let them do whatever they want. I don't know if that was your question, but that's where my brain first went.
There's no reason for me to ask why, because you just gave the answer to why. So I just wanted to see what your perspective was. Steve, like?
Yeah, for me, honestly, I'm still learning. I think that it's something that, you know, it really, I'll say for me, growing up, you know, in a Christian home with a very traditional family with very traditional roles, we have mine, you know, again, this is how I was brought up, this is how I was raised, you know, and this is the culture that I come from, you know, understanding that there's different dynamics to the world. Like for instance, I'm going to make a very, very minute analogy, but you know, in Nigeria, you know, we eat jollof a very specific way, and that's the way that, you know, jollof is made, only to grow up later on to find out there's other cultures that make jollof and they make it slightly different, and they still call it jollof, and I'm like, how dare you call that jollof, and it's not my, you know, everybody has, as society, we ultimately have different ways in which we perceive the world. And depending on your specific social group, you know, what part of the world you are, you will live by different rules. And it just is just the nature of the beast. Um, for me, again, coming from a Nigerian culture and a Nigerian ideology, I grew up in a very specific way. But living in America, understanding that there's other avenues and different ways people can grow and identify. And again, it's just different for me, but that doesn't mean that it's, you know, without merit or it's unfathomable. It's just doesn't identify with the group the social group that I was brought up in, you know. So those two will always kind of be something where I'm trying to tussle with and trying to understand how those two worlds come together. But as I am a scientist by heart and believe in, you know, like there's evolution of society and evolution of culture, I think that even as people, we can evolve as well. So
No, I think
super
I mean, I have
scientific
no issue.
and ambiguous answer.
I expect nothing less at this point. The day you become direct is the day I'll be very shocked.
Oh man, I'm ready.
You know, gender fluidity is what it is, right? I
Mhm.
agree with the both of you. I have no issue with it. It doesn't affect me. It's not my choice. I'm not going to tell you how to run your life. I'm not going to tell you what to do unless you're my child. And that changes. So speaking of which,
Mm.
how are you going to teach your kids about gender or gender fluidity?
That is such a good question, man. I didn't even think about the kids angle. I mean, ultimately, when I think about kids, we try to teach kids. We try to. I'm gonna teach my kids the best of what I know to be right and to be true, and the ideologies in which I believe in.
Do you think
So
that's the best approach?
because that's what I know.
You can know
Like,
more. You're a
I mean,
scientist,
I'm not
right?
saying that
You can do research. You can collect data.
yeah, and then but then okay, to your point, as I research and collect data, that becomes part of what I know. So you could kick rocks with that.
That's not the best of what you know. That's something that you do know, but what you're gonna accidentally fall back on or subconsciously fall back on is your core understanding of it, right? If you haven't been in that situation long enough, there's not too much that you'll know about or speak to it. You'll accidentally say a couple of things here and there that are innocent things, but end up being highly influential to your child.
Oh yeah, I agree 1,000%. And even to the point where but I do want to kind of tug on your strings a little bit because I think that yes, I agree that there's so much information out there in the world, right? There's good, there's bad, there's all the above in between. But we as we consume information, we're making a decision about everything that we hear, everything that we receive. And now as we kind of look at our children, we're the filters. Our job is to be the filters for them. You know, we should I do not subscribe with the ideology of just throw them out into the world and see what kind of product they become. Because I think there's a lot of things out there that are not necessarily best for children, or that can kind of push us in a direction. And nature versus nurture, you can have that argument, but I do believe that nurturing makes a huge difference. You know, leading the child in the right direction makes a big difference in who they ultimately become, and then the values that they ultimately have. So based on what information I have and the knowledge I have, that's what I'm going to define as the best thing for my kid. Now, as I learn more things and get more knowledge myself, and that's why it's important as adults, you need to be educated your damn self, right? You can't necessarily say that you're teaching your kid the best of everything when you don't
But
know.
there are some educated adults that still push a different agenda of education, right? There are some highly intellectual adults, but what they teach their kids may not be reflective of how society is acting at that moment, or what society accepts.
Yeah, but we look at society through goggles. We look at it through lenses. Again, you can be highly intellectual, but I still need to make the inference of what comes into my house. I still review your information, and I'm the type of person. I'm over here checking credible sources, and I'm checking references and looking for scholarly sources and stuff like that to make my decision. Some people don't do that. Some people are just like, oh, how many references, how many likes does this have on Facebook? You know, okay, 2,000 likes must be true. You know,
So to your
everybody
point,
make
there are
go
scholarly
ahead.
sources that have been wrong, right?
But that's what I'm saying. It really still, again, that's why I think that the ultimate toll, the ultimate task falls on the parent and the individual, because you're the one that's making the filter. You're filtering what comes into your house and what based on what you perceive to be true and not true.
Okay. Noted.
No, I mean, Chucky, what are you talking about? I want to hear
Nah,
it.
you're here it is, right? It's been a while since I've been on, so of course I'm gonna poke and prod at you to get everything out of you.
No, and
So like,
I do and I enjoy that, but I just think that so I'm gonna flip it back at you then, because
mhm.
again, as I said, regardless of how much information and how you perceive that information, you filter what goes into your house and what goes into your kid. So you define their reality.
At
Like,
times
so whether it's true or not, oh, okay, I'm listening. At times. I heard that.
there are other influences in the world that I can't control. They're gonna go to
Mm,
school. I can't watch them at school all the time. I can't control what their friends say. I can't control what they get into when I'm not seeing it, right? I can put on as many child blocks, many filters as I want, but some things will slip through. And some things may be more influential in a matter of 30 seconds than what I've taught in 3 years. And I have to understand and realize that and react to it. And that reaction isn't a negative reaction, but it's trying to understand where they got this information from. They may have a class that talks about gender fluidity, and I could be wrong. I could be 100% wrong because this shit changes almost yearly, right? There
mm-hmm.
are things that people are learning that are more acceptable than what I've gotten used to. It's not my job to learn about gender fluidity, right? I have another job to take care of. Doesn't mean that it's not important to me. But what it means is to say I can't keep up with everything. And that's completely okay. And I can admit that I was wrong. I can admit that, hey, there are some things that are really good that I just didn't see or just missed. So I am the filter to a certain extent. When they go out them doors and they hop on that school bus and they take their little asses to school, they grab their lunchbox, only thing I can do is wait for them to come back and try to answer as many questions as possible, right? I can try my best to be a filter, but at a certain age, I know that I'm no longer the filter. I'm just the person in the background trying to make things make sense. And they learn how to filter on their own.
Mm,
And those filters will be calibrated over time. So my responsibility is that I give them enough tools to put those pieces together for them to have the filter that they want. I can teach them to be a Republican, right? And they'll come out and be a liberal. There's nothing I can do about that. They're not wrong. That's just where they are in life and at that point.
mm-hmm.
So the only thing I can do is just support that and show that there are going to be differences in life, but with those differences, I will accept you. So that's the way I look at it.
So not to the point
Yeah.
of defining the world, but how they filter the world. You teach them that and then just set them out in the world. And
it's not like, oh, fend for yourself, but it's just like I gotta keep providing them the tools so they can make better decisions. Like if I become their everything and defend them from everything, they can't react to nothing, right? They don't know how to respond to something on their own because I'm creating that barrier.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like, hey, here are the tools to create your own barrier, which you accept and what you don't like. That doesn't happen day one or day two or year six. There are appropriate times to pass on certain tools, right? Just like there's
Mm-hmm.
appropriate time to drive, there's appropriate time to drink alcohol, there's appropriate time to shoot guns, there's appropriate time to vote. And that's the way I look at it. Like I'll have all these things already stacked up and they're implemented at certain stages because it's just a build up.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I feel like it's I look at this as a super simple thing. My parents did not tell me that that I should my parents never said you are a boy, you should like girls. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna take that same approach, right? Like my son, whatever, my biggest thing is whether he was my son, or if I had a daughter or whatever, the biggest thing is just teaching them to be responsible, teaching them to be confident in themselves, teaching them to be responsible for themselves. To me, there's so many other more important things there's so many other things that I need to like make sure that this person has equipped with in life, that all that other stuff to me, I don't necessarily, I think sometimes people put too much on it. I remember and I feel like we've all had these stories of growing up, most of my cousins are girls, right? And my few male cousins are not, don't live anywhere near me or whatever, right? So my girl cousins were like jumping rope. My dad was like, you can't jump rope with them, right? That's what girls do, or whatever. And like, I thought it was a weird thing or whatever, but like, I'm sure he probably wouldn't say that today. But like that is a weird thing. Like what is girly about? I mean, it does look a little funny jumping the rope or whatever, right? But to me,
not if
it's
you're
like,
doing it for aerobics.
yeah, it's just like, why wouldn't a kid just like why couldn't a kid just have fun? That's not going to a kid jumping rope, right? Or a kid playing with a doll. That was another one of those things, right? Like, put that down, that's a doll, or stuff like that is, to me, is really stupid. Like I feel like that's like toxic shit that like I'm glad to hear that parents aren't really trying to do in today's world, right? Like why couldn't a girl play with the car? You know what I mean? Like, what is it, because she's gonna play with a car that she's immediately gonna like want to be referred to as, you know what I mean? Like people like take these like extreme jumps that like because a kid wants to do one thing that they're gonna like like I have this one, there's these people that we know, their son, for whatever reason, he really wanted to wear a dress, right? So like to not make a big deal out of it, they let him wear it. He doesn't want to wear it anymore, right? It was just like a thing that he wanted to do, right? But they didn't like look at it and be like, oh, if we give him a dress, he's gonna like, they didn't like add all these like adult assumptions to things, right? They were like, oh, he wants to wear a dress for whatever reason, or a skirt or whatever. It was a skirt, right? Because he saw it in a movie, right? So I guess similar to what you were saying, Chunky, asked questions like, oh, why do you want to wear this, right? Like, oh, do you just want to wear this because you saw it in a thing? Or do you want to wear this because, it's some other reason, right? Asking those questions, right? But to me, just kind of letting them, decide whatever they want to do. And again, as long as they're not hurting themselves, right? I think it's my job to support my son in whatever he wants to do, be whoever he wants to be, right? It's just that simple to me. I don't care about any of that other stuff, right? I'm going to try my best to not repeat some of those like really weird things that, that we had growing up with, again, the, playing with certain toys or whatever. Like it just is like or wearing a certain color, right? Chunky, I know you love to wear color pink, right? Like that was a thing where like, why are you wearing the color? Like you can't wear pink, like what? Because you wear a pink shirt, you're gonna immediately turn into this, you're gonna immediately want to, so like I think sometimes and especially in today's society, I think we can put like more pressure on like that type of stuff. And from everything that everyone's told me about kids, is just like, just let them, don't try to react too much to things, right? Ask them questions, don't try to put like your adult like things over it. So to me, and I also want my kid to be in a place where like he feels comfortable telling me something, right? Whatever it is, right? No matter what he's feeling or whatever. But I think it's really that simple. I'm just really kind of learning this as I go. But everything I've read and from hearing people that I kind of respect, that is the biggest thing, is just not putting too much on certain things. And it's not you cannot, just think about when we were young, right? We were not, our parents, once we left the house, to Chunky's point, there wasn't anything our parents could do to stop us from, doing stuff we weren't supposed to do,
In
right?
these streets.
Yeah, like, and I would say it's probably even harder now. So like, yeah, you could put a block on their cell phone, but the person standing next to them has a cell phone that isn't blocked, right? So they could see whatever content is on that. Like I remember going over to my friend's house and watching movies we were not supposed to be watching, right? There was nothing my parents could do in that situation, right? Like there's nothing that they could have done for me at home that would have stopped me from being in that situation, right? So to me, I think it's just about, just raising our kids to be, people who, think for themselves, who, as much as possible, make the right decisions most of the time, right? No one's going to make the perfect decision every time, but just kind of, you make these choices, these are the consequences for you making these choices, right? And you having to live with them. But maybe I'm too much of a new age parent, but I just don't, I don't want to like put too much thought into that stuff. And I also don't think that whatever the school teaches them, or if they watch something, I don't know, I don't agree with that it's going to like change them. Like I think that as long as we also balance that out with other things, like I'm not too worried about what the outside world can do.
I don't think you're a new age parent. I think to put things in perspective, everything you said was true, and I agree with. We're just parents of our own environment. We grew up differently than our parents. We had more accessibility to information than our parents. Our kids are going to be different from us, and they're not going to be new age parents. They're going to be the correct parent for that generation and that age, right? Because as a parent, you're taking old values and you're trying to instill them onto your kids. Will your kids automatically gravitate those values? Yes or no? But then they'll have something else to merge with what they're learning over time, right? Oh, our parents told me about this, and this is how they would react, but that's kind of outdated. It actually influences their decision making, whether it be negative or positive. It actually gives them a compass to go by, right? They're actually calibrated themselves based off of what they're learning out in their real world, right? Because we can talk about how we grew up in like high school and like and even middle school, right? Come home watching Nickelodeon, eating fruit by the foot or fruit roll-ups and all that other like horrible stuff for us, but it was like the greatest thing ever. Eating pops, eating honeycombs, and it's just like now it's more conscious or health conscious food, right? It's like, oh, this wasn't good, right? All right, here's 100% dried fruit snack for your kids that's better than red dye number 46
no flavor.
Like remember we used to go to the corner store and get those those quarter water juices, like that was just straight chemical, right? But now you can go to the store and get 100%, like literally 100% juice, where it's just apple juice and water. That's it, not like concentrate and like potential flavoring. Like that's just the change in where we are, right? And we're going to do that as parents. Is like, I'm going to give my child the best thing at that moment, right? Because we can afford that, or like that's going to give them longevity, so we don't have the issues that we have now, right? Affordable healthcare, better healthcare, not affordable, just better healthcare, right? Better opportunities. We're able to see that a mile away because of what we were in, what we have done to where we want to put them. Putting that all back together when it comes down to gender, they're going to go to school and learn something. Dre, to your point, and back to D, back to you, it's just like, hey, we can't filter that shit. It's like I can't stop them from watching whatever they want to watch. I have to leave this out. Only thing I can do is have an open platform of discussion. And that's not being my child's best friend, but that's giving my child the opportunity to discuss things that it's a judgment-free zone, right? Hey, that wasn't the right thing. Here are the reasons why. You're not wrong, but this has no real potential later on, right? You went through that situation. Please don't do it again. Hear them in a myriad of reasons why. As kids, it was just like, you're not going to fucking do that. That's it. And we were just like, well, why? Oh, you're talking back to me? And it's just like, nowadays, this is different. We're just like, these are the reasons why, because the more we educate you, the better it is. So when it comes down to understanding gender, there may be another gender that's created, right? That we just don't see. And there's nothing we can do about it, because based off our understanding of history, this is what we know about these gender communities, right? Now it's expanding, right? So, I mean, at some point, there will be the acceptance of aliens. That will be a completely different gender. I'm trying to be like an asshole, but I'm just saying, like, it starts to build out, right? And what we know and understand fits into it, but only a small space. So the only thing we can do is just be supportive, understanding, and just, sit on the front porch, rocking our chair, and just grumble about like how it used to be back in the day where things are very simplistic.
I think
But
it's
I
so
mean, that's
interesting because it's so interesting because like I think part of the issue is that we grew up, we went through our challenges, we went through our adversities, and we kind of like come down to like these principles and saying that these are the things that have made us successful as who we are as human beings and who we are as adults, and we want to pass that on to our next generation. But of course, they have more options, they have more exposure, they have more range of visibility to things that we have no idea. And I think the fear of the unknown is always kind of part of what skews the conversation because we have no experience on how to deal with that. So how do we direct them on what decisions to make? We don't have the experience. So because it's like I don't know what that is, I don't know what that is. I have no experience with that. I'm unfamiliar with that. So let me just bring you back to this little round where I've had successes and use this, use these. I don't know what all that is over there, but just use this. But it's interesting because now when I think about it, the younger generation has more social experience or social awareness for the current era than we do. And it's just a fact of the matter. So if anything, to now that I think about it, to Chunky's point, yeah, there's going to be stuff that they're going to learn in society about music and sports and about themselves and even how to troubleshoot problems. For instance, we were more taught on consequence, so that's why if you don't do what I told you, I'm going to beat your ass. Versus the consequence of now we still teach on consequence, but the consequence is like you have to define what the consequence of that situation is going to be. How is that going to affect your life? Like we ask them to articulate more and think more, So I don't know. I just think it's really interesting because there's like, how do we equip them? How do we guide the next generation when we are not even equipped for the things that they're facing? It's just crazy.
I mean, so look at it this way, right? So we look at how we grew up and the way we understand gender. Look at what the world's putting out with gender today.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a challenging thing, right? How do you define your gender? What gender are you? What is the influx that we have when you identify as being a male, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I have to tell my daughter my identification as a gender. But what male means to her may not be the same what male means to me because of what she's going through or for what she's learning. So one, what is your gender identity? And two, are you willing to accept that your gender identity isn't the same as how you grew up for it to be?
I think so I identify as a man, which is funny because I've never ever said that before as a male.
Mm-hmm.
I've never
Yeah.
felt that's something I would ever have to say.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because social definitions are kind of spilling you know, into like biological discussions. And the line between social and ideological and biological, they're all becoming so gray and blended together. But the discussions around these things are continuing to happen. There are people who are extreme one way versus extreme another way, but I think it's just a matter of put your pride aside, get to the table, and let's have a discussion about it. Because the world that we live in today is different from the world of the past, but that doesn't mean everything of the past can be erased. That doesn't mean everything that we grew up with is not applicable today. But that again, and then there's always that tussle of what is applicable today, what is not applicable today. So, you know, in having a conversation with a child, the next generation, yes, I'm still gonna identify as a male, because that's how I grew up identifying. But I feel like the way that they may perceive that identification is going to change because, again, the social construct around it has changed.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't have anything extra to add. Yeah, I think that it's just not I still really just feel like we put way too much like emphasis on it. Like it's just not I don't know. I never think about me being a man or male until I have to check off a box to do it, right? Like it's just not a thing that I think of. Like, and I think that just with all like the politicized stuff around it, like I just feel like people are putting a lot more on it than it really needs to be. It's like somebody wants to use the bathroom, like people are just trying to use the bathroom. There's no yes, there are always exceptions to the rule, but it's just like that simple. People just want to use the bathroom in the bathroom that they feel comfortable using. You know what I mean? Like it's really that simple. Again, I know that there's always people who who are breaking the laws or do things that they aren't supposed to do, but just the overwhelming majority of people are just trying to like live their lives, and they don't want anyone to stop them from living their life. And I feel like we're just putting too much extra sauce in that. I know there's extra things with I know some of the things that have been popping up in the news are like around sports, and that's that's a very interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Which is on that one, I'm definitely a little bit more that one to me is a little bit more straightforward. But the bathroom and some of these other things, I'm like, look, we're putting way too much, we're putting way too much sauce on that.
I want to get back to the sports one.
Yeah, the sports one is an interesting one, and even that one, I'll definitely have, I may shock you with what I feel on the sports thing. Because sports to me is a little bit more black and white. But the other things are a little bit easier.
Because I just think just as a quick question, I just think that and I agree that, as society changes, certain things that matter don't matter as much, but having a sense of identity younger, or even being like, for instance, me being, and I don't know if it's good or bad, I'm just going to speak on it, but me knowing that I'm an African American male, it did play a significant part in how I grew up perceiving myself and how I interacted with society. So I understand that, yes, there is a lot of emphasis on it now, but that's the reason. But I think the part of the reason why there's so much emphasis on it is because it is an older ideology that's being challenged. Like it's open for discussion right now, where we're talking about it and we're debating on what does it mean. So so people are really going to put an emphasis on it, because if I can't say, okay, like for instance, if I ask my parents, like, who am I or what group am I belonging, and they're like, whatever you want to be, we have no idea what that person's going to grow up like. They may not think about themselves, oh, I'm a minority. So society's going to remind them sometimes.
But what doesn't matter, right? And
I was going to say,
but it does. But I think it does matter, because for instance, as a black man, and I'm going to just think as a black man, not to go too far on a tangent, but there's definitely some challenges we face because we are black men. And I'm Nigerian. I wasn't even born in this country. I'm not even socially or historically connected to all the challenges that black men have faced in America. But because of the way that I look, there is going to be challenges I'm going to be facing throughout life, period. So if my parents didn't take the time to teach me that or prepare me for that, I don't know what would have happened to me.
I think that's a hindrance too, right? So Dre can talk, but he's light skinned, so he has a little bit more benefit than I do. The darker you get, the worse you have it. And I know I say it jokingly, but that's just the truth, right? So I start mentally restricting myself when I identify as a black male. I am a black male. I am a black African American male, whatever case may be, but I know what comes with it, and it stops me from doing certain things, and it assumes my perception from other people because of my skin tone, right? I can tell you to this day, people look at me all types of fucking sideways when I go out in a neighborhood that is not predominantly black, right? Because of their understanding and assumption of it. So if I came out and like, hey, what am I? It's like, whatever you want to be, understand this is how society perceives you, but you can choose what you want, right? You are black. You are a male, period. You're going to have to handle adversity. But if you feel as though you're above what society perceives that to be, go for it. Because then you don't limit and restrict yourself. When you walk into a room, you don't think like, hey, these people see a black man and that's it, and they're going to treat me this way. I see me as one, amazing and outstanding individual. I see myself as a fucking unicorn, whatever case may be. But I'm going to go and do the job without any restriction, without any hesitation, without any external pressure put on myself. Right. And that's what I'm saying. It's like that does make a difference. That does help you think cleaner. And it's weird to say that because we didn't have this mental health thing when we were growing up, right? It's just like, shut the fuck up and do it. Oh, you feel that way, get the fuck over
Be
it.
a man.
Oh, I'm going to spank it. Yeah. Have you seen those things, Be a Man? On Instagram? It's like, oh, your wife is yelling at you. Slap her. Be a man.
What?
Like,
that's wild.
It's like random stuff where it's funny because it's like it's shit that we grew up with that we were taught like get through it. So what? Right? One other interesting thing I heard, like when a man says he's all right, he's not really doing well, right? We're taught to hold those emotions in.
And roll through it.
Especially being a black male, we can't complain about anything. Right? We're always angry. We're always on a prowl to do something. We're always violent, but that's not the case. And it's like you start expressing that unless you're around a good group of people look at you like, shut the fuck up. Like that's you're crying wolf and you don't need to, right? I'm self-made. Well, are you a different ethnicity? Did you have different privileges than I did? Oh well, you're just gonna say, no, let's put things in perspective. But if you don't create that line, you don't abide by that line. That's pretty much what I'm getting at. So it is helpful and hurtful to tell someone who they are, right? But you tell them to give them a perspective, like you said earlier, the lens in which you perceive society and the lens in which society perceives us. So there's a give and take and push and pull. So it's just like when I tell my daughter, like, hey, you're a mixed baby. And I was like, I can tell you whatever you want to identify as, you can, but you are female. At the end of the day, is how I classify you, and it's not a negative classification, right? Like here, your daddy's traditional understanding of gender, right? And if it changes tomorrow, it changes tomorrow. I'm completely okay with that. My goal as your parent is to get you to the highest point in life. However you decide to get there, whatever route you take, I can't judge that. I just want the best for you. So I'm going to do things to try to ensure that, which may delay your growth because you don't agree with it, right? But that's all want to being the parent, all right? We didn't think our parents were cool once we got to a certain age. Like, oh, we're going to the movies. Like, nah, Dad, I ain't going to the movies. I'm gonna be caught dead with you in the car, right? Like, I would rather walk the 15 miles to school than you drop me off. So that's just how it is as parents.
Yeah. Also, you can't help what society views you as well, right? So like, it don't matter what you identify yourself as, right? Deep, like if you identified yourself as a light-skinned man, it don't matter what you deem yourself as, right? Society's gonna, again, you can't control what, and I think that's another thing that'll be helpful for me to teach to my son is, right? I don't know how people are gonna perceive him, right? I'm already light-skinned. Wife is white. I don't know if he's going to, there's always these people joke around like he looks ambiguous or whatever. I don't know what he's going to look like, right? But I do know that, that for the most part, once people find out that his father is Black or, Black and Puerto Rican or whatever, they're going to see him as a Black man. That's just kind of how there's that one drop rule, that they always say, right? So yeah, it doesn't really matter what. I don't care what society, for me, we can't control what society views things as, right? Maybe we can play a part to it. Maybe we can help change things or whatever. But again, at the end of the day, I think it's just important that we raise our children just to be good people who are respectful of others, who are confident in themselves, right? Don't take shit from people, who, take care of people that they love in their life. Like, I feel like if we do all that other stuff, all this other shit with gender doesn't matter, right? Like if I could just make the person be like a good member of society, right? Like going back to like our previous, podcast episode, right? Like just being a good person in society, it doesn't matter. All that other stuff doesn't matter to me, right? Like I feel like as long as we teach people to not, oppress other people, that's another thing I think is really important, right? Just because I don't agree with something, I shouldn't be stopping someone else from doing something, right? Just that whole, I think, okay.
Caveat there. So when people, so I feel as though it's fair to oppress oppressors, right? So if someone does something that I don't like what they're doing and is completely wrong, then you have to stand and push on it, right? I see what you're saying. That's what I'm adding as a caveat.
If someone's doing, someone's robbing someone, like, you
Shoot 'em in the
should try
face.
to do.
Shoot him in the face.
Maybe a little too
Capital-
early to be joking about shooting.
Capital punishment.
A little bit of a crazy.
For robbery?
But more what
I
I mean of, like, you know what I'm talking about with, like, oppression is like because
yeah.
I don't agree with
you.
you. I don't want you to use this bathroom. It's like that's oppression. The person just wants to go to the bathroom, man. The person wants to take a shit, man. Simple as that, right? Like, so to me, if we could focus more on that stuff, like making society better, right? Bringing up, less fortunate people and all that. Like, I feel like if we focus on that stuff more than, like, this gender shit, we'd be in so much of a better place. But, it's just unfortunate that we're, having to deal with, gender issues or, I don't want to start, a thing, but, the whole, the Roe v. Wade thing and all that stuff like that. There's just all these things that are happening that, I think it's just, I don't know, it's really sad. But again, all I can control is, like, what's in my house, right? That's really what the best thing I can do.
That's a scary thought, right? But we give them the tools for success and just hope they win out. And it's not nothing against their capability, but we all know how life is, and this shit ain't fair. So we can only say, like, hey, here, go hunt. And that hunting's not to harm people, but, like, go gather the things for you to be sustainable and to gain success and to help others. But at the end of the day, some people, like you said, Dre, we're not the people to sit there and just block people from what they want to do, but there are the people out there that'll just block you just because they feel like doing it. They may not have a rhyme or reason, and then when you press on it, they don't have an answer. That's just, like, how they're conditioned. It's like, how do you deal with that? Like, someone punches my daughter in the face, I'm like, punch them right back, but with more violence. It's just like, it sounds weird, but it's just like, how do you stop something? You don't to meet force with equal force, right? Teach that person a lesson. It may not be you. The answer may be walking away, right? There's someone else that can handle that better than you can at that moment. You're not equipped to approach that situation and be successful. You will approach the situation, you will damn near fucking lose everything that you have, but there's calculated decisions, and that's what we teach them. Like, I'm all about putting pause on people, but for my daughter, I'm a little bit more hesitant, right? Because I want her to be better than me. Not every situation you can put your pause on that person. Use your brain, figure something out.
She has half of your DNA, so I feel like she will be inclined to put hands and feet on people.
Oh yeah,
so much damage. So much damage.
And she's gonna, you know what? And she's gonna look at you and be like, I couldn't help myself. And you can't be mad. You're gonna be like, you know what? Fine.
I agree.
Like,
I'm on my way down to the police station to bail you out. You did what I used to do. So now we're gonna open up this conversation and say, like, hey, like, you learned that lesson. That's it. So that's just how it goes. But I mean, nonetheless, yeah, this I think we're facing different challenges than what our parents used to face, right? But that's part of being an adult. So, like, I don't think they had to worry about gender roles and gender issues, because it's just like, if we wore a skirt, I want to get back to that. Skirt for men is called a kilt, right? Barbies for men are called action figures, right? So it's what we labeled it as, but at the end of the day,
it still happens.
Did the same thing.
That's
but we decided to label it differently. So, like, it's okay for a female to watch a romantic comedy or a romantic movie, but for men, our romance is in the comic books, right? Peter Parker and Mary Jane, they had a relationship, and it taught us about relationships or reading these comics, but there was violence rolled into it, which is more attractive for some of us, right? You look at Bruce Banner, who's an extreme intellectual, right? But then again, he had the side of him of the Hulk, just smashing everything. But the lesson out of that, like, you can be highly intellectual and handle your business physically, right? So there are things that were being taught that we really didn't pick up on, but we saw it as the norm. So it's okay for us to get angry, but on the other side, like, I admire this man because he's so smart and he's so scientific and he makes great decisions. Professor Xavier, right? I would not want to be him. Not because he can't walk, but for simple fact that he made a lot of logical decisions, right? He was able to calm a room. So we were taught what a leader is by just reading these books, by reading these comics, right? But some females may, and it's not to be offensive or anything, get it a different way. It may be actually just reading a book with no pictures and it's just straight words. It's just how their mind works. There's certain movies that they watch or movies that we watch, right? Think about your best acts. Think about James Bond, right? The man is a skilled and trained killer, but he's also good with women, right? He's also good articulating information. So that's how we like internalize this stuff without really paying attention to it. So we were taught gender roles in certain ways, but what we neglected is just those small things that men put out that are not glorified, but they exist. And you look at it, it's just like, damn, like go back and look at all the old cartoons, right? And how they were and like what was said and how they got clowned. But emotions were put in there at some place. Like how men did certain things a certain way was put in there at some place. Whether it be physical, because some of us gravitate to that, whether it be emotional, some of us understand it, whether it be intellectual, because some of us understand that. So, going back to gender norms, we just put labels on it to make ourselves feel comfortable. Men and women have been doing the same thing since God knows when, right? But there's a separation in their capabilities because we're just geared different. We're just created differently to have our certain attributes to complement each other. I'm not saying that whatever other gender you are, you can't complement another gender. That's completely fine. But we just did that in a sense to have it make sense to us. And some people just took it to the extreme. Cool. I think this is around the end. It's been too great. It's been too fun. And I really had a good time with all of you. But for more content, want to learn more about the podcast, feel free to check us out at Jerk Off Collar Pod on Instagram. Podcast episodes drop every Wednesday. Stay tuned for the outro coming up right after this one. Additional ways to reach us and to send us your feedback. Be sure to like, share, follow, or, well, you better subscribe if you're not a subscriber. Like what you're hearing, feel free to follow. Feel free to leave us a review on your preferred streaming platform of choice. Been a little rusty. I apologize about that, but guess what? This is what the fuck you got. This is it. We're done.
Peace.
Shout out to Glenn.
Peace.
Shout out to Francis.
All to the franchise.
Yeah.
You're missed. Can't wait to
Yeah,
get us
you're
all back on this. But hey, we here. Peace.
Peace, everyone.
And that concludes today's episode, but that doesn't mean the conversation has to end. As a matter of fact, feel free to check us out at JJC Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter for our post-discussion question following the release of this episode. If you are a Black or minority business owner or professional that would like to be featured on the Rep Yours segment of our show, or a listener with some general feedback for the podcast panel, feel free to shoot us an email at jjcpod@gmail.com. As always, likes and comments are always appreciated. Be sure to subscribe or follow to be notified when the next episode releases. And until then, stay safe, stay blessed. Peace.